I'm Patrick Star, and I live with my parents!
Quick question before we start, how long do you think this reboot will last? Let me know down below. Contrary to popular belief, even though I do really enjoy Fairly Odd Parents, I love Robot and Monster. I made a whole rise and fall on it, even though no one's talking about it. Danny Phantom, Invader Zim, Glitch Tex, even Rise, SpongeBob is my favorite Nickelodeon show, all things considered. Not only has it been influential to me growing up, it was also one of the reasons I even knew a place like this on YouTube existed, where a bunch of teens and 20-somethings got together and complained about why this episode of SpongeBob had too much pain or gross out or ignorance, and if it wasn't for episodes like One Course Meal, A Pal for Gary, Choir Boys, and Pet Sitter Pat, I probably wouldn't have even known about this community at all. And speaking of Pat, he was a large source of anger and frustration in the community, and I remember the countless hours I poured into watching person after person rip his character apart, which is strange, because I understand how much of a star that he is, pun intended. He's iconic, and in this community, he's torn between not that bad and the gluttonous shell of a sea star that he once was. And I bring all of this up to say that as much as I love SpongeBob, I have also grown to understand why people are jaded towards it. It's like working at your favorite fast food restaurant and realizing that the gunk caked on the deep fryer was the reason why your fries taste so good that day. It's something that if you enjoy it, you know, some people probably would prefer not to know about the things that go on in the background. However, given the amount of years that I've been on this spinning rock, I've grown to understand that at least when it comes to SpongeBob, it probably won't die. It probably will evolve. And we are experiencing that next evolution beyond us. The question is it good though?
This is my dad! This is my mom! This is my sister! She's shy! This is my grandpa! This is my show!
I don't think I've ever used this word unironically on my channel, but this feels like a fever dream to me. This feels like a cutaway gag that shouldn't exist. The Patrick Star Show is a very weird show. Like Camp Coral, history, continuity, and all be damned, but we'll call back on it when we want to make a reference, which doesn't make sense to me, but a lot of fans seem to love it. They sure do love when a reference comes up in reboots in which if you enjoy when it's connected, you should at least understand why people would want the non-jokes to be connected, like his family, especially his sister.
Hey, let's go inside and play! House too small. Make bigger!
Jumping into this episode, Squidward serves as a newspaper delivery person, which may confuse some of you because you may know him to have a job. We'll get to that. Patrick wakes up in this Pee Wee Herman-esque room full of various colorful items, sleeping upside down, a drastic contrast to his minimalistic rock, and he also has a pet sea urchin named Ouchie.
The best way out of bed is an urchin on your head.
Oh my god, he did the thing! They did the thing where they referred to a previous thing that I know about. They did the thing, guys! Like in Squidward's Sick Days, where they gloss over a major part of the story and just threw in a reference haphazardly. That makes for good writing when you reference something randomly, right? So to catch you up to speed, this first episode is about the obvious. Patrick running his show. He brushes his eyes because when you have a dumb character, but you're also being quite lazy with the writing, you don't make your dumb characters clever to lean on the excuse that they're dumb. You make them do anything because you can wave it off as them being dumb. As he goes towards his show, there's this running gag about how Patrick opens a door and there's this armored fellow wanting to aggressively show off his weaponry. Not only does it not go anywhere, but it leads to the bigger point that I have. I don't believe that this show knows what it wants to do, at least not yet. And I do say yet because this could be like an Owl House thing where the first episode drastically differs from the rest, but I'd like to imagine that since this is an episodic show, I'm not gonna hold on to the benefit of the doubt that tightly. Take this next scene where Patrick opens his show, guided by his little sister.
I can do anything, cause I know nothing. Lack of experience never stopped me. I got a TV show, though I'm just bluffing. Make believe you're watching and I know you'll agree.
He basically says a whole lot of nothing, like those 10-minute long videos that take 9 minutes and 30 seconds to show you the homemade volcano that they made. I'm guessing that this is supposed to be very eccentric, wild, unpredictable, you don't know what's gonna come next, but still follow a very loose and visible line of logic that brings it all together. The issue is, this is not even remotely funny. There's a joke about a guy being grossed out to seeing Patrick, which isn't really all that well told. I mean, I get get that it's a butt joke, but so what? Have you not seen the first movie? So instead of starting his show, you know, on the Patrick Star Show, he gets hungry. Surprise, freaking surprise. So his sister does the logical thing. Play an unironic commercial of the Chum Bucket. Now, I enjoy Plankton as much as the next person, but let's think about this for a second. Already you have seen SpongeBob in the intro, Squidward in the beginning scene, Plankton here. You haven't seen much of the sister, the mom, the grandfather, the dad. None of these characters have yet to be seen. And Patrick himself hasn't done much yet. Yeah, we get a 10 to 20 second uninterrupted ad. Is this YouTube? What purpose does this ad even serve? Does Chum or Plankton play a large role in this? No, it's just another reference joke that you and I can fangirl about being smarter than the average barnacle head, while simultaneously forgetting the fact that Patrick historically has had another sister and another pet. Oh, and speaking about things just being shoehorned in just because.
Morning, Mom. Good morning, Dad. Mom, Dad. Who's this guy?
I have no idea. Do you, Cecil?
This is my grandpa.
I get some people will say he's dumb, but bear with me for a second. I'm not gonna bring up any examples I brought up with my other Patrick video. I came well prepared.
We can build you a new house.
We can't build a house.
It's a very wild and loose episode of SpongeBob, and I recall a time in which SpongeBob was building his
House?
but it wasn't connected to anything, so said plank would fall down on Patrick, so he would do the seemingly logical thing and move his stand only for the plank that was above the spot that he went to have the same problem. You see, he's dumb, but he's not illogical. His actions were rooted in logic. If the plank is falling down here, if I move here, it's not gonna do that anymore. He just didn't have the common sense to look up and actively investigate what was causing the issue. Patrick is still supposed to have logic. If his character just forgets something haphazardly and has no rhyme or reason, then what's the point of any of this? Why have him remember his mom and dad and not his grandfather? Answer that genuinely for me. It literally doesn't matter if he can just forget it 5 seconds later.
I'm your grandfather, Grandpat. Must we do this every morning?
Ah, so they do this basically repeatedly. Good to know. We don't learn much about these three characters and Patrick that we technically didn't learn in the original series. We don't learn anything new, as anything we would have known. We would have seen over the 20-year period that he's been engraved in our brains. The only thing of important here is that Patrick does not get to eat. Surprise, surprise. Ironic, given that we see a scene of Patrick wanting to get to the good part and only being served an empty plate, a symbolic gesture of what this reboot seems to be so far. Isn't it funny how in the last video I talked about Patrick, I noted how the writers just love to have Patrick eat, and that's pretty much it? Well, I kind of lied. Remember when I said that this episode is about Patrick wanting to start his show? Well, it's actually about Patrick eating. Sorry, you got clickbaited.
Hey, it's the Dogfish family.
Good morning, Patrick. Would you like to join us for our sad and meager breakfast?
Well, no, I guess not.
All right, then.
Following in the Butch Hartman later seasons of Fairly Odd Parents, when in doubt, just place a whole bunch of repeating jokes that don't progress or complement any future jokes. Just like the door gag that comes back twice, technically 3 times already. When Patrick explores the seemingly never-ending house, he gets to his grandfather's room, in which he goes off on Patrick saying that back in his day, he was the food, showing a long, unnecessary flashback, calling back to characters similar dinosaurs, which runs into the same issue that Camp Coral has. These reboots suffer from a double-edged sword where if you remove any of the context of the previous show and look at this in a vacuum, these characters appearing over and over make absolutely no sense, and for Patrick's grandfather to call back on them also makes no sense. And if you were to say that the only reason that dinosaurs look like that is to be more identifiable with the child audience, I'll say most kids know what dinosaurs are. It's like up there with like an astronaut, like they know what these things are. The reference to the other characters doesn't add anything to the scene that the story didn't already make clear. However, if you do add that context, you know, that context that you don't necessarily want to follow, we already know what Squidward and Patrick were like in the past, in the prehistoric age specifically. We have episodes that have gone over this. So not only are you disregarding history because you don't feel up to the challenge of continuing it, you're also just shoehorning in lazy callbacks because the story lacks any foundation without them. Like if you didn't know who Patrick Star is, would you watch a show about a dumb gluttonous starfish with memory loss issues try and find the conflict in 11 minutes?
Now we're going to make a casserole. Socks, dirty sneakers, dried leaves, old paperbacks, and used napkins.
You gotta work with what you got.
a prophetic statement towards what I'm watching right now. After we got done with the throwaway segment that even iCarly wouldn't have entertained, the original at least, it just occurs to me. You know, I really slam a specific section of SpongeBob fans who watch these reviews and they do understand and agree with my sentiment of how much I don't like a lot of recent SpongeBob episodes. Not all, but some. Like, to those fans who feel like I'm not out of line for asking for things, very basic things, like a joke, a connection to something from before, for it to do what it was on record to do since 20 years ago, thank you for sticking by me. But that doesn't mean that the people who complained and farmed the hell out of the sentiment of this making Hillenburg turn over in his grave is safe. If you are under the notion that you don't like this show, or Camp Coral specifically, and only because Hillenburg wouldn't have wanted this, and that is your main gripe with nothing about the quality of the shows or your interest in them, you are also really misguided. What most people are referring to are articles like a 2004, 2009, and 2019 article in which the latter expresses opinion in a joking statement that he's against reboots. Here's where you would have to admit your hypocrisy if you cling on to this statement. Within these same articles, Hillenburg expressed that he doesn't like the tie-in of his show and fast food. But how many of you were outraged about getting a SpongeBob toy in your Happy Meal? Hillenburg didn't want that. Within the same article, he'd also expressed a concern about the rapid commercialization in merch, literally stating in reference to a SpongeBob doll being made, "My biggest nightmare is that I'm going to be at the beach one day and one of these dolls is going to wash up on the shore like garbage." Yet no one would bat an eye at the fun edition of Battle for a Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, which comes with a bunch of merch and a jacked up price. He'd even initially push against the first SpongeBob movie until he saw Iron Giant. And my point is, it's not consistent to tout the whole "this isn't what Steven Hillenburg would have wanted" flag when there's a lot of things that he wouldn't have wanted, and the people who dish this criticism, either unknowingly or maliciously, go out of their way to not actually know what this man's stance was against the show. To cherry pick your agreements with him ruins the premise of what he wanted, because he approached things from an environmentalist perspective. He was a marine biologist, to which most people don't. Most people would approach this from a self-serving perspective, which is just fine. What you like is valid, but don't put your pedestal on a guy who literally didn't even like being introduced as a creator of SpongeBob sometimes. Just because he didn't want to see SpongeBob everywhere doesn't mean that you can latch onto one specific vertical where SpongeBob is expanding and think that it isn't hypocritical to order all of these video games, all of these merch, and even watch videos like this that profit off of it. All of it is commercialization. Just because you don't like certain sections of the commercialization of SpongeBob because it's bad doesn't mean that you could just use that specific criticism for the ones that you don't like, because guess what? Hillenburg didn't want a lot of stuff that went on around SpongeBob. But anyway, let's watch Patrick solve his problem of being hungry.
Dinner? Whoa!
Here we are. It's called a treasure roll. I learned it from a show I saw today.
Well, there you have it, folks. Just to be clear here, Patrick, our protagonist here, in his first episode, think about that for a second, he got his first episode, solves his problem of eating by waiting for the next meal. That is the adventure we went on. That is what this show is about. We really just watched him derped around for 11 minutes trying to find something to eat, only to have the situation solved with nothing on his end. He didn't learn anything, he didn't tackle an issue, he didn't do anything interesting. He literally existed, and through him existing in the kitchen at the right time, he got food. Now you'd probably bring up, but Jay, he solved the issue by doing a cooking segment on his show. That's why they have the same dish that he cooked be served during the resolution of the conflict. And I'll say, then explain how his parents already knew how to cook before he did that segment. That segment didn't lead into his mother learning how to cook. She just cooked that specifically. There's no reason to believe that Patrick would have gone hungry without the show. Look, I know Patrick has potential, more than this, and it's a shame to see it squandered the way that it is right now. I don't know where it all leads to, but I do know I'll be keeping a tab on it. In the meantime, watch No Hat for Pat, a better episode than this, and remember Patrick being a lot more creative than this. Until then, guys, thank you guys for being so patient with me. I got a whole bunch of stuff coming out. Until then, take care. Off out.